Hi, my name is Mabel Hawthorne. I'm 78 years old, and for a long time, I believed being quiet was the same as being respected. I was wrong. What you're about to hear is the story of how I was slowly pushed to the sidelines by the very people I once held closest until I took back the keys to my own life, quite literally. It's a story about loss, silence, and the road to rediscovery. And if you've ever felt forgotten, dismissed, or underestimated just because of your age, I hope this gives you something back. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below if you've ever been made to feel like you're too old for something. Let's remind the world that we are not done yet. And before we begin, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? I love knowing how far stories like mine travel. Now, let me take you back to the day I lost my car and found myself. I never thought I'd measure betrayal by something as small and ordinary as a pair of car keys. But that's how it started. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind I used to treasure. The sun stretched across the curtains like honey. I'd set out lemon tea, and the shortbread cookies Drew liked as a boy. The house smelled faintly of lavender oil and worn books. I had even polished the wooden tray I'd used for years, the one Alan and I received as a wedding gift nearly 5 decades ago. Drew and Marissa arrived late, distracted. Already halfway through some argument, they paused just long enough to greet me. Marissa air-kissed my cheek like I was an acquaintance at a charity event, not the woman who once sat beside her in the delivery room. I tried to keep the air light, talked about Lucy's upcoming recital, asked about Drew's latest client, even offered to make his favorite tuna salad for lunch. He barely looked up from his phone. "We already ate, Mom." I nodded and folded my hands in my lap. Then, after some murmured exchange between them, the kind that happens just out of earshot but you feel, Drew pulled something from his pocket and placed it on the table. "Tate, keys." The red leather keychain Alan gave me on my 65th birthday gleamed in the afternoon light. Drew looked at me with that soft, syrupy tone people reserve for toddlers and the elderly. "Mom, we've been thinking. You don't really need the car anymore, do you?" I blinked. "What?" "You barely go anywhere these days. It's just sitting in the driveway. We were talking, and we think it's time to sell it." The word, we landed like a gavel. Marissa didn't say anything, but she folded her arms and leaned back in her chair. Her silence was agreement. Something in my chest shrank. "That car," I said quietly, "is how I get to the library, to the church meetings, to—" "We can take you when you need to go," he cut in quickly, as though he'd rehearsed the answer. "Or get you an Uber if we're busy. It's just not safe for you to be driving anymore." I sat there, staring at the keys like they were a fallen flag. That red sedan wasn't just metal and rubber. It was the car I used to rush Alan to the emergency room, his hand squeezing mine as I ran red lights to beat time. It was where Lucy, just 12, cried in the back seat after her first heartbreak. It was freedom. It was history. I didn't say any of that. I just nodded slowly. "I see." Drew smiled, relieved. "Good. I already spoke to someone who might be interested in buying it. He'll stop by next week." He patted my hand like I was a child who had done something brave. Marissa added, "You'll feel so much lighter without the burden of car payments and insurance." I wanted to scream. I paid off that car in full 5 years ago. But I didn't. Instead, I excused myself, walked slowly to the kitchen, knees stiff, fingers trembling. I busied myself refilling a sugar bowl that didn't need it, waiting for them to leave. I don't know how long I stood there, but the front door clicked shut, and the house sighed with silence again. That's when I slid down to the floor, tea, towel still in my hands, and let myself cry. Not loud, not dramatically, just the kind of slow, private cry that comes when you realize you've become invisible in your own story. And yet, somewhere, Deep beneath the sadness, something else stirred. Not anger, not yet, but the first spark of awareness that I was being written off, that they'd already started deciding what I no longer needed, as if I were a burden to be managed, not a woman with a lifetime of agency and grit. I picked the keys up from the table that evening. I traced the initials on the keychain. A.H. Alan Hawthorne. My husband, who always said, "Keep the wheels turning, love. You were never meant to sit still." I placed them gently back into my drawer, even though I knew they wouldn't stay there for long. I wasn't sure what would happen yet. But I did know this. I may have lost my car. Hadn't lost myself. They didn't even ask me. A week after Drew placed my keys on the table like a quiet verdict, the red sedan was gone. I walked out one morning to water the potted lilies, and there was just an oil shadow on the driveway where it used to sit. I stood there a moment too long, watering can in hand, heart sinking like it was tethered to that last glimpse of independence. When I asked, Drew said casually, "Oh yeah, Mike from the office took it, gave a decent price for the age. We figured it was better to just get it done." "We?" He brushed it off with a laugh. "You said you were okay with it. I don't remember saying that. Maybe I was silent, and silence in their minds was always permission." From then on, I was driven places, when it suited them. Grocery runs were suddenly group outings, complete with reminders like, "Don't forget your list this time, Mom," as if I hadn't been managing a household. Since before they were born, Drew's schedule became tight. Marissa would occasionally pick me up, but her sighs were louder than the turn signals. I stopped asking. I offered to host Sunday dinners again. I still had Alan's handwritten roast chicken recipe tucked in the drawer beside our old napkin. Rings. I even bought fresh rosemary. Marissa replied, "We're just doing takeout these days. It's easier." I told myself not to take it personally, but I did. That month, Lucy had a dance recital. I wasn't invited. I found out through a Facebook post shared by one of her friends, a blurry photo of her in a sapphire costume, mid-spin. The caption read, "So proud of our little star." I stared at it for 10 minutes. I clicked like, closed my laptop, and wept in the laundry room where no one would hear me. Then came my birthday. 78. A beige sweater, 2 sizes, too large, handed to me over lukewarm coffee at their kitchen table. "No card?" I asked, gently. Drew shrugged. "We figured Lucy's party kind of covers both. One big celebration, right?" No candles, no song. Just Marissa scrolling on her phone and Lucy saying, "Can I go now? I have a group chat." I sat there, holding the sweater in my lap like a final receipt. They didn't mean to be cruel. That was the hardest part. It wasn't malice. It was convenience. That's when the loneliness began to settle in. Not sharp. Not like grief. More like fog. Thick and quiet and hard to explain. I began to notice the distance in everyday things. Photos of me started disappearing from their house. Once, Lucy had a picture of us in her room, the two of us laughing over banana splits, whipped cream on our noses. I noticed it was gone. The framed wedding photo of Alan and me, which used to sit on the mantel in the living room, replaced by one of Drew and Marissa on a beach in Mexico. I asked Lucy once, gently, "Remember when we used to go on Sunday drives? You'd bring your sketchbook." She smiled politely. "That was forever ago, Nana. Forever ago." I began sitting, more often in the den, the one room they hadn't yet tried to repaint or rearrange. I kept the lamp low, the same one Alan used to read under. I'd wrap myself in a quilt we bought on our trip to Colorado, sip tea, and watch the light fade across the old bookshelves. I still made 2 cups, out of habit. Sometimes I'd talk to Alan out loud, just a line or two. "They think I've gone soft. Or, you should have seen the way Drew looked at me today, like I was luggage he didn't want to carry anymore. He didn't answer, of course, but the act of saying it helped. Once, I asked Drew if he could take me to visit an old friend in the next town over. Grace had just lost her husband, and I wanted to bring her soup. He paused, mid-bite of his grilled chicken. That's over an hour each way, Mom. Why don't I set up a Zoom call for you? Zoom. I nodded and said, that would be nice. But the words tasted hollow. Because what I really wanted was to sit beside Grace and hold her hand while she cried. The night I finally admitted what was happening, I was sitting alone as usual. I reached for a photo of Alan and me at Yellowstone. Wind in my hair, his arm around me, both of us squinting into the sun. I whispered, I think I've become unnecessary. And I meant it. That's what no one tells you about aging. It's not the wrinkles or the aches that hurt most. It's the way people start talking over you, making decisions for you, tucking you away like fine china that no one uses anymore. But china cracks when it's boxed for too long. I didn't crack. Not then. Not quite. But the silence around me was getting louder. And I knew something had to change. Not because they would suddenly see me differently, but because I finally started seeing myself again. It was a Tuesday when I asked to go to the library. Nothing fancy, just part of my routine. Every other week, I'd pick out 2 novels and 1 memoir, sometimes a poetry collection if I felt brave. That little habit had been mine for over 40 years, ever since Alan and I moved to this town and found the library tucked between the hardware store and the old post office. I stood in the kitchen, smoothing my skirt as I asked, Drew, if you've got a moment, I'd love a ride to the library today. He didn't look up from his phone. Why don't you just use your Kindle, Mom? I hesitated. I like paper. I like the shelves. Marissa, standing nearby with her protein shake, said without glancing at me, You know, you kind of slow him down when he takes you out. He's got a full plate at work. I blinked, heat rising in my chest. It'll only take 15 minutes. Fine, Drew cut in, already grabbing his keys. Let's just go. No joy in his voice. No curiosity about what I might be reading. Just irritation. The ride was tense. Drew turned on a podcast, some financial talk radio, volume far too loud. I couldn't even hear myself think. I sat in the back seat, like a guest being chauffeured somewhere she hadn't asked to be. The seatbelt cut into my shoulder, but I didn't adjust it. I didn't want to move or breathe too loudly. I just watched the town pass by outside the window like it no longer belonged to me. When we pulled up in front of the library, he didn't park. Go on, just grab a couple and we'll head out, he said. I stared at him. You're not coming. In? He shook his head. I've got emails to answer. We're on a schedule. It felt so small, so absurd. But in that moment, I wanted to scream. Instead, I opened the door and stepped out. My knees ached from the seat. My handbag strap was twisted. I shuffled into the library like a woman twice my age. I didn't browse. I didn't walk the aisles like I used to. I grabbed 2 books at random, titles I barely read, and checked out without speaking to the librarian. Drew honked before I reached the door. On the drive home, they didn't ask what I picked, didn't ask what I was reading. Marissa chatted, on speakerphone with her sister about some resort in Tulum. I might as well have been luggage. When we got home, I climbed the stairs to my room slowly. The books weighed heavier than they should have. The walls felt narrower. I sat down on the edge of the bed and opened the drawer beside me. There, tucked beneath old letters and a lavender sachet, was a photo of Alan, one I hadn't touched in months. He was leaning against our first car, arms crossed, eyes squinting at the sun, grinning like he always did when I caught him off guard. Tucked behind the frame was a small yellow note. I had nearly forgotten it was there. Keep the wheels turning, love. You're not meant to sit. Still, he'd left it on my dashboard the day we bought the red sedan, a private joke between us, because I was always threatening to drive cross-country the minute he retired. That note, folded so many times it felt like parchment, trembled in my fingers. I traced the words with my thumb. Something broke inside me. Not my heart. No, that had already cracked. This was something deeper. A shell. A silence I had worn for years, wrapped around me like wool. Comfortable, familiar, suffocating. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. I wasn't just being forgotten. I was being erased. Little by little. Ride by ride. Dismissal by dismissal. And I had let it happen. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I lit a candle and read one of the books I had randomly checked out. A story about a woman who disappeared into the desert and found herself again among wild horses. I wept quietly. Not for the woman in the story, but for the woman I used to be. Before my voice got soft. Before I started apologizing for simply existing. Alan would have said something sharp and wise. He always knew when I was folding in on myself. But he wasn't here. So I whispered to the darkness, "It's time, isn't it?" The flame flickered once, then held steady. That night, I slept with the note beneath my pillow. It was the coat that started everything. Alan's old gray wool coat, the one with the frayed inner lining and the elbow patches worn smooth by time. I hadn't touched it in years. It hung in the back of the hall closet like a memory suspended between seasons. I kept it there not out of need, but out of respect. It smelled faintly of cedar wood and pipe tobacco, even after all these years, like him. I had been sorting through clothes for a local shelter, jackets I hadn't worn in a decade, scarves with moth holes, boots I could no longer walk in. I reached for Alan's coat out of habit, intending to hang it back up. But as I shook it out, something shifted in the inner pocket, a weight I hadn't noticed before. My fingers slipped inside and brushed paper. I pulled it out. A thick envelope. Yellowed slightly, sealed but brittle. My name was written in Alan's handwriting across the front. Mabel, if you need to remember. I sat down on the bench by the coat hooks. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside, a copy of our living trust, one I had forgotten existed. It detailed in clear black ink the property we purchased together in Sedona, a small house we had dreamed of retiring to one day. And there, in bold print, was the line that made my breath catch: sole ownership. Granted to Mabel Hawthorne in the event of spouse's death. My heart pounded in my ears. There was more. Tucked behind the document was a folded bank statement from a joint investment account I hadn't touched in years, one I assumed had been closed or absorbed into other things after Alan passed. My name was still on it. And the balance? My eyes had to adjust to count the zeros. Nearly $500,000. I sat in silence for a long while. The coat beside me, the envelope in my lap, the light outside dimming into that soft orange haze of late afternoon. He had left this for me, hidden in plain sight. My Alan, always thinking 3 steps ahead, even when I wasn't looking. I couldn't explain what I felt at that moment. It wasn't just shock, or even betrayal. It was a strange collision of grief and power. A door opening, a map unfolding. A version of myself I thought I had lost returning, slowly to the room. Because I knew. I knew that Drew had seen these papers after Alan's death. He had taken charge of the estate, signed the documents, consolidated accounts. I had been too heartbroken to look too closely, too busy holding tissues and memories and pretending I was okay. I let him handle everything, and he had, but not with transparency. He'd moved funds around, probably assumed I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't remember what belonged to me, that I was too old, too tired, too trusting. I stared down at the documents and felt my face grow warm, not from shame, from clarity. I had let him shrink my world, but I wasn't small. I never had been. The next morning I called Mr. Penley, Alan's old lawyer, now half retired but still sharp as a knife in January. "Penley Law," he answered. "Arthur," I said gently. "It's Mabel. Mabel Hawthorne." A pause. Then, warmly, "Well, I'll be. How long has it been, Mabel?" "Too long. I found something I'd like you to look at, if you have time." He did. His office hadn't changed in 15 years. Same oak-paneled walls, same brass lamp with a little chain pull. He wore a faded vest and still scribbled notes in longhand. I placed the envelope on his desk, watched his eyes move across the pages. He flipped to the property line, raised an eyebrow, then to the account summary. He blinked, sat back. "Well," he said, adjusting his glasses. "This is a surprise." "To you too?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Didn't you know about this account?" "No," he frowned. "Mabel, this is substantial. It's entirely in your name, and this trust is airtight. If your son was managing your affairs, well, he either missed this or intentionally left it unmentioned." I felt my jaw tighten. "Which one do you think it was?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We went over everything together. The account could be accessed immediately. The property was fully in my control. No liens. No disputes. "I'd advise you to revoke any power of attorney you previously signed in your son's favor," he said, scribbling notes. "Quietly, and we can move these assets into secure holdings under your sole authority." I nodded. "Let's do that." When I left the office, the sun was warm on my shoulders. I walked 3 extra blocks that morning, just to feel the sidewalk under my feet again, just to remember that I could. My reflection in the pharmacy window startled me. Not because I looked old, but because I looked steady. My shoulders were square, my back straight. I hadn't seen myself like that in a long time. That night, I opened a fresh notebook, the leather-bound kind I used to keep my garden plans in, and wrote 2 sentences. "Alan didn't forget me," and "I won't forget myself again." I slipped the coat back into the closet, but I kept the envelope on my desk. A reminder, not just of what was mine, but of what I was still capable of building. I always believed change happened slowly, like tree. Rings or wrinkles, showing up only when you looked closely enough. But I was wrong. Some change comes fast, like breath catching in your throat, like the sharp, clean sound of a page being turned. It took me 3 days. 3 days to remember who I was, 3 days to make a plan. On the first morning, I brewed coffee, in Alan's old percolator instead of the Keurig Drew had insisted on. It took longer, but it tasted like memory, strong and slightly bitter, exactly how Alan liked it. I called Mr. Penley after breakfast. We transferred the investment funds into new accounts only I could touch. We updated my will. We revoked the durable power of attorney Drew had once asked me to sign just in case, back when I was too fogged by grief to read the fine print. Penley was silent for a long moment when the final document printed. Then he looked at me and said, "You always had it in you." I nodded. "I just forgot for a while." The second day I called a realtor in Sedona, a kind-sounding man named Thomas who'd handled property sales for retirees. "I'd like to list a small house out there," I said. He asked if I wanted to visit it first. "No," I replied. "Just make it clean, quick, and fair." He chuckled. "You're the boss." Yes. Yes, I was. On the third day, I stood in front of the mirror and reached for the dusty lipstick tube buried at the back of my drawer, a soft coral shade called Sunset Whisper. I hadn't worn it since Alan's memorial. I pressed it on with a steady hand, not because I wanted to look younger, but because I wanted to look present, alive, intentional. Then I took a taxi to the dealership. The young salesman barely concealed his surprise when I stepped out of the cab. He gave me the usual look, the one people give older women when they're not sure if we're lost or confused. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Can I help you with something?" I walked straight up to him and said, "I'd like to test drive a cherry red convertible, preferably something American with real kick." He blinked. "This is a bold car." I smiled. "Exactly." They brought it around, a 2020 Mustang convertible, low to the ground and gleaming like a sunset dipped in fire. When I sat behind the wheel, something electric stirred in my chest. I adjusted the seat, shifted into drive, and pulled out of the lot like I'd been doing it every day of my life. The wind whipped through my hair. I turned up the radio, Sinatra, and for the first time in years, I sang along. When we returned, I didn't haggle. I just said, "I'll take it." The salesman asked, "Do you want to sleep on it? Maybe talk to your—" "No," I interrupted. "There's no one left to ask." He nodded quickly. "Would you like to finance or—" "Cash," I said, handing him the check from the Sedona sale. His eyes widened. "Right, cash." That night, I packed a single suitcase. I didn't overthink it, just a few dresses, my favorite reading glasses, Alan's photo in a silver frame, and the note. "Keep the wheels turning, love. You're not meant to sit still." I left a letter on the fridge for Drew. Just 5 words. Heading out for a little drive. No explanation, no apology. He'd know what it meant. The next morning, I slipped the keys into my purse, walked out the front door, and didn't look back. As I turned the ignition, the engine purred like a promise. I opened the top, let the morning sun touch my face, and took the long road out of town. The one that curved past the old church, the dogwood, trees, and the lake where Alan once tried to teach Lucy how to skip stones. The wind tangled my hair. The music played softly. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a burden or a ghost. I felt like a woman on the verge of something new. Las Vegas had never been on my bucket list. Alan and I always preferred quieter places. Mountains, coastal roads, towns where coffee came in chipped mugs and time moved a little slower. But I wasn't here for the noise or the lights. I came for the symbolism. The day I arrived, I checked into a suite that overlooked the strip, high enough that the world below looked like a snow globe of flashing signs and silver reflections. Velvet curtains, plush carpets, and a tub deep enough to disappear into. The kind of room that reminded you, without apology, that you still had a choice in how you lived. I slept in, ordered room service, spent long afternoons by the rooftop pool, sipping blood-orange spritzers and reading novels I never had time for when I was busy being everyone else's convenience. At night, I walked the streets, not far, not fast, just enough to feel the buzz of the world under my feet again. One evening, I bought a last-minute ticket to a magic show. I laughed until tears rolled down my cheeks. The woman beside me asked what I was celebrating. "Freedom," I said. She clinked her glass to mine. A few days in, I bought a postcard from the hotel gift shop, a gaudy thing with gold foil lettering and a sketch of the strip lit up in neon. I took a long time writing it. Dear Drew and Marissa, having the time of my life. The convertible is perfect. Love, Mom. I mailed it the old-fashioned way, with a stamp from a blue box on the corner. I imagined their faces when it arrived. That tight, high-browed panic Marissa wore when things slipped out of her control. Drew's thin-lipped silence, the kind that usually ended in blaming someone else. It didn't take long. The phone rang 2 days later. I was on the balcony in a soft robe, drinking tea while the sun lit the mountains behind the casinos. Drew's voice came through sharp and breathless. "Mom, where are you? What are you doing?" I took a slow sip. "Good morning to you too. Are you in Las Vegas?" With your car?" "Yes, and a lovely room with velvet curtains." He paused. "Why?" "Because I wanted to," I said. "Because I could." Another pause. Longer. "You didn't tell anyone. You just left." I smiled to myself. "I left a note. On the fridge." "That's not—" "Mom, this isn't safe. You can't just vanish like this. You're not—" "What?" I asked gently. "Not capable? Not allowed?" He exhaled hard. "You know what I mean." "No," I said, my tone firmer now. "I don't think I do." There was silence on the other end. "I revoked your power of attorney, Drew, weeks ago." He tried to speak. I didn't let him. "I've transferred my accounts, sold the Sedona property. The proceeds are in my name now, all of it. As it should have been. I was only trying to help." "No," I interrupted. "You were trying to manage me. There's a difference." I could almost hear Marissa in the background, whispering, or maybe pacing. "You never asked," I continued. "You decided. You decided I didn't need a car. You decided I didn't need to go places. You took my silence as permission to clip my wings." "Mom, I'm driving, Drew, like I always could. You just stopped seeing me." There was something fragile in his next breath. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" "Because I trusted you," I said. "And I was grieving, and maybe, just maybe, I believed you when you said it was for my safety. But now I see. You were preparing for my decline before I ever declined." His voice softened. "So what now?" "Now," I said, steady as glass, "I live my life on my terms." "Does that mean you're done with us?" I paused. "No," I said. "It means I'm done being a side character in my own story. I'll still be your mother, but I won't be your afterthought." He didn't know what to say to that, so I ended the call the way I wished he'd end more things, with dignity. "Take care of yourselves," I said. "I'll call when I want to." And I meant it. That night, I drove the convertible down a quiet stretch of desert highway just outside the city. The stars above blinked in a sky so dark it looked velvet. The wind kissed my face. Somewhere along the way, Alan's voice echoed in my mind again. "Keep the wheels turning, love. You're not meant to sit still." And this time, I didn't cry, just smiled, because I knew he'd be proud. It's been 2 years. The days move differently now, slower but richer, like honey sliding down warm toast. I live just outside Sedona now, in a small adobe cottage tucked between red rock hills and fields of wild sage. The mornings smell of sun-baked earth and chamomile. The silence here doesn't feel like loneliness. It feels like peace. I start, most days on the front porch with a cup of cinnamon tea. The porch creaks under my old rocker, and I've grown fond of the sound. My hands are more wrinkled than they were when I left, but they feel stronger too, like they've remembered who they belong to. Once a week, I drive into town in the convertible. Yes, that convertible. Still polished, still purring like a cat in sunshine. The women at the Sedona Book Club have stopped pretending to be surprised when I pull up. Some of them are like me. Widowed, cast aside, called brave, in the same tone people use for saying tired. But we aren't tired. We're just reclaimed. We trade stories over iced sweet tea and scones, and sometimes we laugh so hard the cafe staff ask us to keep it down. I have friends now. Not out of obligation, but because they see me. Because I see them. Lucy writes to me sometimes. Actual letters, written in careful script, with little drawings in the margins. She's in college now. Says she misses our Sunday drives, the ones where we used to talk about everything and nothing. I felt safest in your car, she wrote once. You always listened, Nana. I didn't know how much that mattered until no one else did. Sometimes, I wonder how much of what happened she remembers, whether Drew or Marissa ever admitted anything to her. I don't ask. I let Lucy come to me in her own time. The last letter hinted she might visit this summer. I hope she does. I'd like to show her the cactus flowers that bloom at night, the bookstore with the cat who sleeps in the window, the little diner that makes pie like it's still 1957. I'd like to show her what freedom looks like on an older woman's face. Last week, I was dusting the shelves when something slipped from between two old gardening books, a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the corners, Alan's road map. I hadn't seen it in years. He'd always loved maps, never trusted GPS. Said there was something satisfying about tracing the path with your finger, like carving your own road. I unfolded it slowly, remembering how he used to mark our routes with blue pen. There, in the corner near Nevada, he'd scribbled a circle around Las Vegas. Next to it, in his tidy handwriting, 3 simple words. Just for fun? I sat down on the floor, cross-legged like I hadn't in years. The memory hit me like wind across a canyon. Alan laughing at some ridiculous stage show idea, teasing me about sequins and showgirls. We'd never gone. So I did. That trip? That moment on the balcony, tea in hand, velvet curtains brushing my ankles. It was for him, and for the woman I had forgotten I was allowed to be. I keep his note now, the one he left in my coat, the one that started everything, on my nightstand. Right beside a photo of us on the porch, decades ago, feet propped up, arms intertwined, laughing like we'd never run out of time. Keep the wheels turning, love. You're not meant to sit still. It's funny how something that small can be the push that wakes you from a long, slow sleep. People still think revenge has to be loud, explosive, dramatic. But I've learned that the quietest kind can be the most powerful. Mine wasn't fire. It was freedom. It was buying a convertible when they told me I couldn't drive. It was sipping cocktails by the pool while they panicked. It was finding myself on desert roads instead of inside their narrative. It was choosing joy over permission. Tonight, I'm sitting outside again. The wind is warm and smells of creosote and blooming mesquite. The stars above stretch like a silver canopy, ancient and wide. The convertible is parked just down the slope. Top down, engine still cooling. And me? I'm not waiting for anything anymore. Not for validation, not for apologies, not for a seat at their table. I built my own table. It's smaller, quieter, but every chair at it has meaning. Every plate holds something I chose for myself. And that, more than anything, is what I wish someone had told me sooner. It's never too late to love again, to live again, to start moving at your speed.